What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Digging Deep. To start things off today, we're going to hit it up with the top news of the day. And I think to start it off, we got to start with the breaking news of the evening that Dak Prescott re-signed with the Dallas Cowboys for a 4-year, $160 million deal with $126 million of that guaranteed. Guys, what are your thoughts on this?
That's a very big contract. Honestly, I think it's well deserved. Dak really does deserve that. He's been wanting a contract like this for a while, so I'm really happy for him that he was able to get a good contract. Jay, what do you think?
I'm thinking the 40 mil a year is a bit much for Dak. No offense to the guy, he's a great QB. It's 40 million a season when you break it down. If he gets all that at the very end. And now I don't think it's a bad deal. I think he kind of glues together the Cowboys. But at the end of the day, how much is he really worth that?
I mean, I think he's worth all of it. Like, let's be honest, he's a very good quarterback. Very good quarterback for Dallas.
I just don't think I call him top 10, though.
I don't know. I think he ranks up there of top 10 of this era right now. Honestly, I could list you my top 10, but he definitely has to rank in there.
I completely disagree. I think Aaron would do the same.
Aaron, what do you think? Do you think Dak Prescott is top 10 of this era, of this time we are in right now?
Out of current quarterbacks right now.
Like out of active quarterbacks right now, is Dak Prescott a top 10?
I agree. I do believe he is. Now, even with him being a possible top 10 quarterback of this time right now,
definitely not all time.
Yeah, no, definitely not all time. But currently, I could see him being top 10. Do I think that his $160 million deal is quite deserved yet? Not exactly. We really haven't seen a whole lot from him yet. I mean, multiple losing seasons and having a hard time winning probably the worst division in the NFL. Obviously, he's going to have a comeback year this year off of his gruesome injury against the Giants last year. If I had to give a hot take right now, I would say Dak Prescott wins Comeback Player of the Year this season, and Dallas makes a run in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, but you could say that Zeke's contract isn't worth it either. You could say that he doesn't deserve that too.
And I think I would. But I'm just saying, for what he's proved, exactly like Aaron said, I think his contract is worth way more than he is right now.
So wait, how much is Dak's contract?
Breaks down to about 40 mil a year if he gets all 160 million.
And
Zeke's is $90 million for 6 years.
Where are you getting that? Where are you getting that?
Just pulled it up.
What?
Guaranteed at signing, $28 million. Total guarantee is $50 million.
Okay.
His average salary is $15 million a year. That's insane.
50?
15.
Oh, okay. That's a little bit better than the 4-year 160 that I heard before. Still, I don't think Dak might be worth all of that.
I mean, we'll find out this season.
Yep, exactly. We're going to find out what he's made of this year. Hopefully, Dallas. I do wish him good luck coming back off that injury, though.
Me too. That was pretty gruesome.
It all works out for him.
Just right now, I'd have to say with like you said, with him having trouble winning the worst division in the game, I just don't think he's worth 40 mil a season.
Alrighty, so moving on, we are going to go back to the NBA All-Star Game last night. Giannis Antetokounmpo was the winner of the All-Star Game MVP with 35 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists. Giannis did set an NBA All-Star Game record that nobody has ever done before. He made all 16 of his shots. That's the first player ever to never miss a shot on more than 10 field goal attempts. And Team LeBron did end up defeating Team Durant 170-150. Guys, what were your initial thoughts on the All-Star Game last night?
I can't say I'm surprised with Team LeBron winning. I think that they were by far the better team. I mean, the starting five they put out there was arguably one of the best teams ever. If you formed them, I think that they would win. That they would be a better dynasty than the Warriors if you had that starting lineup on the court. But Giannis went off, and he undoubtedly deserved that MVP, and I'm glad he got it.
Oh, he totally deserved it, yeah. But like, if you think about it now, LeBron he drafts some of his friends, but at the same time, he drafts to win. When Kevin Durant, he just drafted his friends. He didn't care about really winning. He just drafted his friends and hoped that they could win it for him. And if you look at his team, he had some players go out with injury or not even just be able to play.
And then some other notable performances from the All-Star game last night. For Team LeBron, Steph Curry finished the night with 28 points, made 8 3-pointers. Damian Lillard had 32 points and also made 8 3-pointers. Jaylen Brown, I was impressed with him in his All-Star game debut, dropped 22, and Paul George finished the night with 17. Moving on to Team Durant, Jason Tatum finished with 21 points. Zion in his All-Star game debut dropped 10. Bradley Beal finished with 26. Kyrie Irving with 24. Zach LaVine with 13. Donovan Mitchell with 15. And James Harden with 23.
My initial thoughts were that Steph Curry would have won MVP. He had a great game. Just props to Giannis at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Hey, I gotta say, I'm a little bit disappointed with how Zion played. I expected him to drop more than 20. Yeah. I know it's a lot for his debut, but I feel like he could do it. But can we also take a time to talk about Curry's dunk? That was awesome. That was pretty cool.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Steph is one of the most fun players ever, I think, in my opinion.
Speaking of Curry, let's talk about that three-point contest win.
Yeah, the final shot over Mike Conley, that was impressive. And then to mention too, with all the festivities last night, Anthony Simons of the Portland Trailblazers did win the dunk contest over Obi Toppin and Cassius Stanley. It probably was one of the more disappointing dunk contests that I've seen in recent years, but nonetheless, it was a dunk contest.
Yeah, that last one was pretty crazy. I mean, it would have been crazier if he actually got up to the rim like he said he would. But, I mean, that was pretty awesome. I really thought Obi Toppin had it, though. That was my prediction
going into, and yeah, he was my pick going into it as well.
I do like to see kind of a lower name guy get some recognition in there, too, especially whenever he's not that bad a player.
For sure, and then
you guys got me?
You can go ahead.
Yeah, we got you.
I lost you guys for a minute.
Nope, we're still rolling. Then in other news, we're going back to the NFL. Seahawks released veteran D lineman Carlos Dunlap. Where do we all think he fits in? Personally, I see him fitting in on 3 teams. He re-signs back with the Bengals where he starts. He moves on to Carolina because they're kind of lacking at the D-line position. Or maybe even a team out west like Arizona or San Fran. So that'll be interesting to see who makes a push to sign him in free agency. Alex, where were you thinking he might land?
Honestly, the Jets. They have enough money in cap to get him. You bring him in, that makes the team so much better.
My initial thoughts going in was that he would end up with the San Francisco 49ers or Arizona Cardinals, like you said, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up with the Bears. I feel like maybe Mitch Trubisky could do better if he had a better defensive line behind him. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, I feel like the Bears do have a pretty solid D-line already, and I mean, they do need to – I would focus more if I was the Bears GM. I would focus more on getting an O-line to protect the quarterback because that's like the one position they're lacking. And so if I were the Bears, my first-round draft pick this year would be used to get an O-lineman.
What do you guys think for Mitch Trubisky in the future?
Oh, he's done. He's a bust.
I think he's done in Chicago. I'm anxious to see where he does move on to, but I personally think his time in Chicago has come to close.
I'm interested to see if he were to take a switch to a team with maybe some better receivers, what he could do. I don't think Trubisky's bad. I just don't think he hasn't played up to what he can yet.
I definitely agree there. Moving on to other quarterback news, two big headlines also came out today that the Buccaneers and Tom Brady are nearing another contract extension. I mean, I think I can speak for all three of us that none of us are really surprised by this move, and we could definitely see Tom Brady and the Buccaneers repeat as Super Bowl champions this upcoming season.
Oh,
I
totally.
completely agree. Well, I remember, if I was correct, last year, whenever he signed that contract, I don't remember hearing a disclosure about how long the contract was. And I thought it was for a couple years, like maybe 3, but apparently it was only for 1. But we'll see what the
believe it
future
was
happens
2.
for. Oh, well, we'll still see what the future holds for Brady and the Bucks, but I would not be surprised if they won another one.
Neither would I.
And then another quarterback that hit the news today, which is some good news, is that Joe Burrow's rehab from his torn ACL and MCL is going well, and he is on track to return for training camp. Personally, that does make me happy. I mean, obviously, I'm a Steelers fan, so the Bengals are a big division rival, but I've always been a huge fan of Joe Burrow, so I'm excited to see him get
Me
back
too.
on the field.
So I
I'm
never
an
like
Ohio
to see
State
it.
guy.
I never like to see anyone get hurt, especially something like an ACL where they're gone the whole year. But I'm glad to see he's back on the road to recovery. But on other sides, what do you guys think he's going to do this year if he does return?
I mean, look, before his injury, he was good. He was on set to be Rookie of the Year. Honestly, I think he could have beat out Herbert for that if he didn't get hurt. I think he's going to come back. He's going to win Comeback Player of the Year. I think he's going to do good. I'm a big Ohio State guy, and I was mad whenever he transferred because they put in Haskins, which I still think was a poor decision. But hey, at the time, Haskins was better. I think he's going to have a great year, though.
On other news, considering rookie quarterbacks this year, Justin Herbert's Panini Contenders 1/1 autograph sold for BGS 910 sold today for $161,130 at auction. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Did I hear you correct on that? Because that's a lot of money.
I said $161,130 at auction today.
Jesus. I mean, I knew Justin Herbert stuff went for a lot, but that much? Like, it's just it's a 1-for-1 card?
Yep. It's a
Is
one of
it
one.
autographed?
Yep, it is. And it's
All
graded.
right, and I see that then. That's
All I
that's
can
gonna
say
be
is wow.
pretty penny in your collection.
Me, Aaron, and one of the other guys we've had on here, Caden, I all know that we have pretty serious collections. But, like, me watching the market, I never expected a Herbert card to go for that much this fast. His stuff was going for insane amounts, so I think that his offseason hype could just ride and get bigger. But how do you guys think that the recent explosion in the card market is going to help grow sports?
I think it's gonna be a big help, honestly. I mean, cards are coming back, mainly Pokemon cards, but cards have also always been around. I see a lot of Pokemon card stuff coming up, but I honestly think that sports cards have always been there, and I think that there's more exposure to it will bring a lot.
Aaron, your thoughts?
I got a different opinion on this. I feel like prices like this might actually hurt the card market because I don't know about a lot of you, but it's been an extremely hard time over the past 2 years trying to find cards. So I'm thinking with the way the whole world's been lately that this might hurt the market for a little bit. But hey, I could be wrong, and we can only hope that I'm wrong. But
as a serious collector, I can totally agree with that. I'm missing the days where like boxes for only $100, but
Oh yeah, totally. Those boxes have gone up a lot. I was on Walmart the other day looking. Those things are expensive now.
I mean, we'll just have to see what the future brings. But I mean, I think it will help, but I think it's also going to hurt sports. Like, at the same time, you're getting all that in the news, but at the same time, you're also killing what something that's more supposed to be for kids in a way, but it's turned into more of a business than a hobby anymore. And I think that like it helps grow the sport if kids can collect their favorite players. And like I get that there's money in it. Like believe me, I know. But at the same time I do feel like maybe they should produce a really cheap set with no possible value for kids to get their hands on.
Totally agree.
Alrighty, so we got a couple more news headlines to hit on. I think the next one, we're going to go back to the NFL and talk about some more trade rumors. It was announced today that Eagles tight end Zach Ertz, Patriots corner Stephon Gilmore, and Saints linebacker Quan Alexander are all on the trade block as of today. Where do we all think they land? I'll start with this one. I think Zach Ertz, there's a good possibility that he ends up in Seattle to either to replace Greg Olsen or he goes back to the Colts to team up with his former quarterback in Philly, Carson Wentz. Jay, where do you think Zach Ertz fits in?
Jay, you there?
Oh, sorry, I was talking on mute. Anyway, I said my thoughts too at first were also Seattle. I do think that makes a lot of sense for him to go back there and replace Quan Alexander. Or not Quan Alexander, but
Greg Olsen.
Yeah, Greg Olsen. But I also think I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up with the San Francisco 49ers as well.
Ooh, that'd be a killer duo with George Kittle and Zach Ertz. How about it? Alex, what are you thinking about Zach Ertz?
Honestly, I could see him going to the Colts, maybe Seattle. I mean, I think he fits in around there.
Alrighty, and then
wait, hold on. What do you guys think of the possibility of him going to the Cardinals as well?
I mean, I think that just adds another dynamic to their offense, which makes them 10 times scarier. So,
what do you think the possibility of that happening is?
I mean, I've only heard his name tied to the Colts and Seahawks as of lately. So, I mean, the Cardinals could have to jump in at the last second, but anything's possible in the NFL.
I would say if I had to put it in order, I would probably say Seattle first, and for me, just 49ers second, then Colts, and then if anybody else jumps in, I put them there, right thereafter. But I really wouldn't be surprised if he ends up with the Niners.
Alrighty, and then moving on to Stephon Gilmore. Personally, I think he stays in New England just because I have a feeling the Patriots are going to have a high asking price in return for him. So I feel like a possibility of a deal being made for him is probably slim to none. But just for the sake of this, if I had to place him on a different team, I would probably say a team like the Bengals or Browns that are kind of lacking at the corner position.
I could see Alex, him on the Browns. I could definitely see him on the Browns. They have money to work with. I mean, they tried to get JJ. They were one of the teams that tried to slip up there and get JJ. Honestly, I could have seen JJ walk on to the Packers as well. I know I'm going a little bit off topic here, but I definitely see Gilmore going to the Browns.
My initial reaction was that, like you said, I don't exactly see a deal being done, just because I think that they would want maybe a first round pick plus a second rounder and maybe like just an average player in return, and that's asking a lot for him. Maybe the asking price even higher. But I just cannot see the Patriots move him now because I wouldn't completely count them out yet. I do think that if they keep going, I think that they're trying to get better in the long run, and I think that they expected to with Cam Newton, although that didn't plan out. I would try to throw Jarrett Stidham in there, see what he can do. He hasn't really gotten a shot. I believe in him a lot too. But I just don't think it's the right time to move Stephon Gilmore right now.
Alrighty, and then moving on to the final player that's been listed as thrown on the trade block. We got Saints linebacker Quan Alexander. My initial thought to where he would fit in good would be the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially with the possibility of Bud Dupree not coming back in free agency, or even with the Green Bay Packers. I feel like he adds another dimension to that defense, which is what they need. Jay, what were you thinking?
As a Saints fan, I can't say I'm surprised that they're mentioning him in trade talks, but whenever I first heard this, the first team that came to mind was the Green Bay Packers, and like you said, it just gives them another weapon on their defense. I just think that the Packers only have room to get better, and if the Saints want to bring in a good quarterback to help them, I feel like that maybe he's one of the first ones that has to go. Speaking of Saints, I wouldn't be surprised if you see more of their defensive guys get chopped away. I think that what they're going to do is start to build a really stacked offense and just have an okay defense is what I wouldn't be surprised if they went to do, because a lot of their money's in their defense. But we'll just have to see going forward what happens with them.
Yeah, and then back to the Saints too. You mentioned in the defense, there have been rumors of a possible Marshawn Lattimore deal being in the works, so should be interesting to see. And then Alex, where did you think Quan Alexander might land?
Honestly, I could see him maybe going to the Steelers, Packers, around them. I mean, he could go anywhere. Honestly, let's be honest.
Another team
someone goes in the right deal.
Another team that I really wouldn't be surprised with that might be like a sleeper team for him, I guess, would be the Washington football team. I feel like that going forward in the next few years, I think they're going to work to only make their defense better with like building behind Chase Young. And I think that would be the right thing for them to do right now. And he only adds to it.
And then to finish things off in the NFL, New York Jets used their franchise tag on star safety Marcus May, which is actually kind of ironic that they did that today, because I was just talking to my friend over the weekend and I said that Marcus May was going to get franchise tagged this week, and sure enough, it happened. I mean, he's one of the best safeties in the league. He's up and coming. That's definitely a key re-signing for the Jets. So if they want to compete, that's definitely a guy that they need back there in the secondary.
I totally agree, but also with the Jets news, what do you think is going to happen this year in the draft? Do you think they're going to stick with Sam Darnold, give him another chance, or are they going to attempt to move on and grab a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence if he falls? I know that's pretty slim, but just do you think they're going to grab a quarterback in the draft or stick with Sam Darnold? Aaron, you can go first.
I personally, I've tossed this idea around a few times, and honestly, like, this could go either way. They could take a quarterback like Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, or I could see them giving Darnold one more shot in drafting a receiver in Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase, or even the tight end Kyle Pitts from Florida. So I'm anxious to see who the Jets use their pick on this year in the first round. Alex, what were you thinking?
I definitely think they could end up getting a quarterback this year, most likely. You never know.
If Sam Darnold does,
they might get another receiver. Honestly,
if Sam Darnold does get traded, where do you guys think would be a perfect spot to try to revive his career as well as Mitch Trubisky? We'll talk Sam Darnold first.
Mitch Trubisky probably would end up somewhere maybe in like Carolina.
I could definitely see that as an option. I would go with Mitch Trubisky to the 49ers, because Jimmy G, there's rumors that Jimmy G might go back to the New England Patriots. So I could see him going there. And then Darnold, I could honestly see him going to the Steelers as a backup to the Ben Roethlisberger is a possible replacement for when he retires. So I'm anxious to see where both of those guys could end up. But I would definitely be surprised if they both end up back in the starting spots they had this past season.
I totally agree. I think Sam Darnold, I think the Jets might stick with him for one more, but like you said, I think I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up going to the Niners. I think he would fit in pretty well there, especially if Jimmy G goes back to the Patriots. So we'll just have to see how it plays out again.
Most definitely.
With Trubisky too, I wouldn't this might be like a kind of a hot take, but if Aaron Rodgers does get moved, like we talked about last episode, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up being a Packer. That probably sounds crazy considering they have Jordan Love, but I think Jordan Love would be the main return for the Bears if they made a deal there.
Hey, I don't know if my whole internet is being really weird.
Okay, I get it. So, Aaron, what's next for us?
Alrighty, so the next thing, this is kind of a crazy news story in a way. Aaron Judge came out and said today that he thinks his teammate Gary Sanchez can win AL MVP this season and said Gary is going to have a special season. What are your guys' initial thoughts when you heard this?
I'll chime in first on this one. Whenever I first saw this today, I'm not going to lie, I laughed. Just coming off the season that Gary Sanchez just had, I just can't see him going right to an MVP just yet. Do I feel like it's there? Yes, I do. But I haven't seen him play much as spring training. For what I have seen, I've seen highlights. He looks okay. I do feel like he's still got some work to do. But he could definitely go up to that MVP type player that he used to play at. Aaron, what do you think?
I definitely agree there. I mean, you look at a guy like Gary Sanchez who had a down year last year and even the season before. You got a catcher there in New York. Obviously, he's not known for his defense, so that's obviously more of an aspect of in New York. Do we move him to DH and bring in a different catcher and have Kyle Higashioka or bring back Romine to catch? I mean, when he gets his offense settled in, that dude is a terror for pitchers. But I think from what we've seen the last two seasons, I mean, I don't know how you could say AL MVP this season. I definitely think he's got a lot of work to do to get to that point, but do I think he could win one in his career? Yes. Do I think that'll be in the next 3 seasons? No. Alex, what do you think?
I mean, I'm going to be honest, my audio kept cutting out, so I really couldn't hear.
We were talking about Gary Sanchez possibly winning AL MVP based on Aaron Judge's comments today.
Most definitely not. I don't see that happening at all in the future. Right now, this season, I see that happening. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the rest of this today, knowing that it's acting up like this. Do you guys think you guys can handle this?
Yeah, we got this for sure.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
We got you.
So I'm pretty sure he just left, but that's good. Yep, he disconnected. So
Okay,
what other
we'll
news
just
do we
edit
got
this
today?
part. Yeah, so finish it off with some other news. I mean, we've got some bad news down in Houston that Forrest Whitley might need Tommy John surgery to repair his UCL sprain, which would probably mean he misses the entire 2021 season. I mean, that definitely affects Houston. I mean, losing a key arm like that would probably have made the lineup this year with Verlander being out. So I definitely feel like that's a big loss for them. What do you think?
For sure. I do think with Forrest Whitley that his suspension a few years ago also kind of hurt him in the long run. I think that maybe if he's lucky, he could make a return this season. I do think it could happen, but as of right now, like you said, it's just a maybe. So I think we'll just have to see how it plans out. I know Astros fans are pretty devastated about that one because they were counting on him to be the ace of the future, and I mean, that's gotta hurt, especially losing Justin Verlander to the same thing this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you got to think, do they go out and try to sign somebody now or maybe trade for a starting pitcher to replace him? So it'll definitely be interesting to see what Houston does to replace him this season, assuming he does go ahead and has the surgery to repair his UCL sprain.
We also definitely have to see how they use their guys that they brought up late last year, such as Christian Javier and Framber Valdez, both who had excellent postseasons. It's going to be very interesting to see how they utilize those guys, and I think that they could make a big difference. I mean, Forrest Whitley, I know, is more of a junk ball pitcher from what I've heard, like change up or so.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see him making a big difference in the future. But we'll just have to wait and see what he can bring to the table.
And then to finish us off for the today's news, definitely we're getting into my favorite time of the year, which is March Madness. And as of yesterday, we've had 4 teams clinch their spot in the tournament, and those 4 teams are Winthrop, Liberty, Loyola Chicago, and Morehead State. I'm definitely excited to watch the tournament this year just for the fact of teams like Duke, North Carolina, Michigan State, and possibly even Kansas missing out on the tournament this year. So it's definitely going to be interesting to watch it without all like the big name teams facing off in the tournament this year.
For sure, and I don't really think we have a huge. We kind of do, but at the same time we kind of don't. I feel like it's the first year in a while we haven't had a really dominant team going into this. I feel like it's kind of up for grabs almost. There's not really that many dominant players as like I feel like in past years, but it's definitely going to be interesting, and I'm pretty excited to announce that we're going to be doing a bracket competition here between the 4 members, and I can't wait to do that. I'm really excited for that.
Yes, me as well. There's going to be more info that comes out about that later on this week, so stay tuned for that. So I think we're going to wrap it up for this part, and then when we come back, we'll get into our team breakdown for today, and then our next overrated, underrated segment,
and maybe some more. So we'll be right back. And we're back. Sorry about that. We had to take a quick break to switch Zoom rooms, but Aaron, tell us where we're at right now.
Alrighty, we are back on day 2 of our team breakdown, and we're going to hop over to the AL Central, and today we're going to discuss the Minnesota Twins. So when we look at the Twins, I see a team that is more a regular season team. I mean, we've obviously all know about their recent playoff struggles, haven't won a game in multiple years. So what do they need to do this year to get out of that playoff slump and return to maybe being a World Series contender or at least making a run in the playoffs?
To me, I think a big part of it is going to be developing their prospects. I think also, especially whenever it comes to the 2021 free agent class, it's an insane one. They can go out and fix a lot of their problems that they have then. But I do think a lot of it is just just struggles in the playoffs too, because if I'm not mistaken, it's been 18 games since they've won a playoff game, and that's a long time if you really think about it. But I'm thinking, especially if they can develop their prospects well, Royce Lewis comes back healthy, they can fill in those places that they lost this year, which we're about to talk about. I feel like they can easily make it. I feel like if they're going to make it through, they're going to have to go through the wild card, obviously, because I picked the White Sox to win the World Series. And I just feel like that they're nowhere near competing with the White Sox right now, and the White Sox pretty much want to one-up them this off season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned the key additions. I mean, really the only big name that they were able to secure in free agency was that of Andrelton Simmons, but another big move that they did make this offseason was re-signing Nelson Cruz. I mean, the guy is 40, but we can't deny that he is still putting up monster numbers at his age. And then you get to the losses. I feel like the losses outweigh the gains. I mean, you look at the guys they lose. They lose Eddie Rosario, Trevor May, Marwin Gonzalez, and Rich Hill, all guys that played pivotal roles in them having success in the past few seasons. So I feel like it'll be interesting to see how they're able to replace those guys and if they're able to get back to a winning streak in the playoffs rather than that of a losing streak. So, Jonathan, what do you think about their prospects for this upcoming season?
One thing I'd like to add real quick is that the loss of Trevor May really hurts too. He was one of their main guys going out the bullpen that they could really rely on. Same thing with Marwin Gonzalez. Kind of looking at him as a utility man that you could always just kind of throw in where you needed him. I do think it was a great move bringing back Nelson Cruz. I don't remember how long the contract was, but we're just gonna see how like a mix of his age and his ability to perform still comes into place, because you got to remember, like you said, he is 40. But Andrelton Simmons is a great pickup to throw in that infield for a bit, especially with Luis Arias's struggles this year or in 2020. I feel like it's going to come down to how those guys play and where they can correctly fit them in, and then see how it works. I feel like if you're in the race, if I'm like the Twins GM and we're in the race, I'm definitely going to try to make a move at the deadline, and I do think that that could really help them in the future. I would like to bring up that in the last few weeks, Royce Lewis has been decided out for the season with a torn ACL, which is a huge, huge, huge loss to them, especially considering many Twins fans in the front office itself was anticipating for his arrival this year, and then maybe move on from Jorge Polanco if he takes over. The prospects I'm very excited to see come up this year are Jordan Blazevich, I think that's how you say his name, Trevor Larnach, and Johan Duran, Nick Gordon, and Chris Valamont. I feel like when you go through them, Blazevich could play a huge role in kind of like cementing a spot in that rotation for a while. I mean, also players that you had that came up last year, such as Alex Kirilloff, are going to make big differences in that lineup. And I'm extremely excited to see what Kirilloff can do this year. I believe in him a lot. I also believe that Trevor Larnach could come up this year, and he's going to make a very big difference too, especially with the loss of Marwin Gonzalez and Eddie Rosario. He's really going to fit in there perfectly. Johan Duran, Nick Gordon, and Chris Valamont are all still maybes, but they're guys you could easily work into that team pretty easily, especially going off of your losses with Eddie Rosario, Trevor May, Marwin Gonzalez, and Rich Hill this year. So what do you think that their kind of record and playoff outlook's going to look like this year? And I'll share mine.
So I do agree with you. I do believe they're going to be a second place team in that division, just solely because of how scary the White Sox look this season. I would still put the Twins at about the 80 to 85 win mark. I just think the White Sox might eclipse that 90 win mark this season. So obviously, like you said, definitely a wild card team. I am hoping this is the year that they do break their slump in the playoffs and win, obviously make it past the wild card round. But do I see them making it past the divisional round? I mean, I guess that just depends how they build their roster at the trade deadline. If they keep the roster that they have now, I don't see that happening, but anything's possible. And I mean, obviously you could make a big move at the trade deadline, to get your team to make a deep playoff run. So I'll hand it back to you to give your outlook for their season.
I totally agree with what you said about 80 to 85 win range. This year, though, my prediction was that the Blue Jays would be in the American League wild card, and whenever you stack the two teams between the Blue Jays and the Yankees up against each other, expecting that the Blue Jays and Twins will be I didn't mean Yankees, I meant Blue Jays and Twins will be the two wild card teams, I just don't see them beating the Blue Jays just because I feel like the Blue Jays have less unknowns in their team. I just feel like if all their pieces kind of come together like they're supposed to, especially with the addition of George Springer, Marcus Semien, and I'm missing one. Who am I missing?
That's obviously not coming to mind for me right now either, but
they've got all those pieces. You got the big three in Cavan, Guerrero, and Bichette, and you've got the pitching there is too. They're also committing a lot of money to Robbie Ray, but we'll get into the Blue Jays more next time. But I do expect them to be around the 80 to 85 win mark and make the wild card, but I do expect them to lose at that far.
Alrighty, so moving on from that, I think we're going to go back to a segment we had yesterday, the overrated, underrated, and rated perfectly. Today we did a mix of NFL, NBA, and MLB. We didn't just limit it to MLB. So we've got 12 players that we're just going to give our opinion of what we think they're overrated, underrated, and rated perfectly. So to kick things off today, it's actually a guy that we discussed in the first part. It's going to be Gary Sanchez. So I'll hand it off to Jonathan to give his initial thoughts on Gary Sanchez.
I think Gary Sanchez is still easily a top 10 catcher in the game. I do think that he's given a little too much credit for what we've seen out of him the past 2 seasons, especially his rough 2020. But I don't really weigh 2020 as much as I do other seasons because of the short season for players like Christian Yelich, who I really believe in. And I just feel like Gary Sanchez is a little bit more on that overrated side. How about you?
I would have to agree with you as well, saying that he is on the little bit of an overrated side. I mean, you see a lot of like professional sports analysts and sports pages rank Sanchez as a top 5 catcher. Now, I know that catcher's kind of been one of those positions over the past few years where a lot of the good guys have retired or slowly getting towards the end of their careers. So it's kind of a diminishing position. But I still don't see Gary Sanchez as that top 5 catcher yet. I mean, we obviously see that he's not the greatest defensive catcher. He has an okay arm, and his bat can be scary at sometimes. But for the most part, I feel like he's a little too inconsistent for me to be top 5. So I would definitely agree and say that he is overrated.
I do think that the talent is there for him to make a big difference and maybe get up to that like top 5 range, especially if he can work on his problems that he's had defensively and fix that bat and be a little bit more consistent. But right now, I would have to say that Gary Sanchez is overrated.
Alrighty, so for our next player, we're going to slide over to the NFL and talk about Russell Wilson. I'll kick things off for Russell Wilson. I personally see him as kind of in a bit of 2 categories. I see him being in a little bit perfectly rated, but he's right on the border of hitting the overrated category. Like, I mean, you see a lot of people talk about how Russell Wilson is a perennial MVP candidate year after year after year. But I mean, you look at his stats this season. In the first 6 weeks of the season, the dude was putting up monster numbers. But then the last like 10 or so games, he just fell off and wasn't the Russell Wilson that we've come to see. So, I mean, for a lot of people to say that he's top 3, I feel like that's a bit of a stretch, but I'd still say that he shows flashes of that. So I'm going to keep him in the perfectly rated category, but I could definitely see him sliding up a little depending on how good of a season he has this year. So I'll hand it off to you.
I almost fully agree with everything you said. I do think that them taking him out for a little bit halfway through the season really did hurt his morale, and I think that could have like hurt him in the long run. Also, if the rumors are true about him being very unhappy with the club at the moment, I feel like if maybe he goes somewhere else, he can get up to that top 3 range. But I would have to agree maybe and say that he's between perfectly rated and overrated. And whenever I say overrated, I mean just a tad, and almost for the exact same reasons as you do. And I really just haven't seen much success out of Russell Wilson like people talk about him being. Like you said, like you pointed out about him being a perennial MVP candidate every year, and it just really never seems to change no matter what his stats are. So for that reason, I'm going to have to say between perfectly rated and overrated.
Alrighty, so to slide over to the NBA, we're going to go to Lakers forward Kyle Kuzma. And I'll kick things off again for Kyle Kuzma. My opinion, Kuzma is his hype was way up at the start of his career. It's still up there a little too much, so I think he falls in the overrated category. You look at a guy like Kuzma, obviously with the Lakers, you've got guys like LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell. So Kuzma's trying to find his role with the team still, I think. We have seen flashes with Anthony Davis being out where he's dropped 20 plus points, but then he follows that up with like a 6 or 8 point performance. So I think he's still got to dial in his shot so we can really see what he's made of. But for me right now, Kuzma is an overrated player.
For me right now, I totally agree that I think once he finds his role in the team, I feel like you might see him get a little bit more consistent. I just think that right now, like you said, he just has games where he is like one of the best on the team. But then you see games, like you said, where he just drops maybe 3 to 6 points, and that's about all you can see from him. Now, I do think that he still has a lot of potential to be better, but right now I would just have to say he's perfectly rated, only because I don't hear that much about him. If I heard more about him, I would definitely say overrated.
Alrighty, so to swing things back to the MLB, we're gonna go to a third baseman who we don't really talk a whole lot about much anymore, at least that I don't hear a whole lot about, and that would be Josh Donaldson. So I'll let you kick things off for him.
Josh Donaldson, a really long time ago, used to be one of my favorite players, but I'm not going to use that into consideration here. I do really think that Donaldson is underrated for the exact reason of people not talking about him as much. He had a great 2019 with the Atlanta Braves. He fit in really perfectly there, and I was honestly surprised to see him leave. But then he had a pretty good 2020 with the Twins as well. I do feel like he kind of fits that missing role at third base for them right now. And I feel like Donaldson can still be that like perennial MVP candidate. And he did win comeback player of the year, if I'm not mistaken, in 2019, I think. And he totally deserves it. The dude battled injuries for multiple seasons, and I feel like that kind of came into the role of where we stopped hearing about him. But I do definitely think he's a top 10 third baseman still.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to agree with you there and say that he is an underrated third baseman. I mean, you look, the guy, he's spent his career with teams like Oakland, Toronto, Atlanta, and now Minnesota. Like a guy with his talent level, you'd almost expect that he would have locked up a long-term deal from one of those teams and like gotten a big extension, like a contract that he deserves. But he's just kind of one of those guys that slid around from team to team, and he's never really gotten that commitment from the front office. So, I mean, for that reason, I do feel like he's underrated. But even the numbers he puts up, like, I feel like we don't talk about this guy enough. Like, obviously, when you think third base, we hear guys like Rendon, Jose Ramirez, Alex Bregman, Arenado. But I feel like you almost have to talk about Josh Donaldson because he is still a very, very good player and can make a huge impact for any team that he is on.
I would like to chime in real quick and mention about his contract. He was one of those players who kind of got screwed over at first with the service time thing, and he just now hit free agency like pretty late in his career if you look at it compared to other players, and I think that that's part of the reason why he hasn't got the long-term deal he could have gotten if he would have hit it sooner.
Alrighty, so to move on to our fifth player, I'm going to let you kick things off here because you might have a little more insight on this one. But it's going to be Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas.
For me, Michael Thomas is hated way too much, and I'm not just saying that from a Saints fan standpoint. I do think that Michael Thomas is probably one of the best receivers in the NFL. And like he's just hated on so much and I can't see why. The dude puts out excellent numbers. He did have kind of a down year in 2020, but I do think he can totally bounce back from that. Michael Thomas has been one of the more impressive players in the past few seasons when it comes to that receiving position. He's also a part of that great receiving core for the New Orleans Saints with Emmanuel Sanders, Alvin Kamara, and then you've got Michael Thomas himself. I do think that maybe if the Saints could pick up another quarterback like Russell Wilson or somebody like lower or get somebody really good in the draft that just kind of falls right into their hands, I do think that he will be perfectly off. But for the reason of him being overly hated on, I'm gonna say underrated.
Alrighty, so for Michael Thomas, I put him in the perfectly rated category because I feel like there are a lot of people that rank him a little too high, but then there's also that mix of people that rank him a little too low. So once you kind of get the balance there, it kind of evens out to where you can find that middle line. I mean, everyone always hates on him because all he runs is slant routes, but you would think as many times as like obviously defenses would know by now, oh, Michael Thomas is going to run a slant. If he's still able to get open and get the catches through the defense, knowing that that's what he's going to run, I mean, obviously you got to give him credit that he is that good enough to be able to continue putting up these numbers with the defense pretty much knowing what he's going to do when he's out there on the field. And he's definitely a guy you want out there at the receiver position. And I would definitely say that he is a top 5 receiver in the NFL right now. But yeah, I don't see him being underrated and I don't see him being overrated. I just think there's that perfect balance where you can find that people do rate him too high sometimes, but there's also a lot of people that say he's a lot worse than what he actually is. So I feel like once you get that middle, he's definitely perfectly rated.
Like you said about him being with the routes is what's amazing when you think about that is that they do know that that's coming, and he could, like you said, he could still get open every time, and like for that reason, I think he's underrated and he's just hated on too much.
Alrighty, and to slide back to the NBA, a guy that's always seems to be in the middle of overrated and underrated debates. It's going to be Clippers forward Paul George, and I'll kick things off here. I mean, you look back at Paul George's career. The dude was an absolute beast with the Indiana Pacers. Then he moved on to the Thunder, and he still put up pretty solid numbers, but we didn't see that elite player that we really saw in Indiana. Now, I know he's come off that gruesome leg injury, and obviously he had a lot of shoulder issues while in OKC that forced him to miss a lot of games and end up having surgery. But even now with the Clippers, I feel like we also have seen the performance he put up in the bubble. His numbers were definitely disappointing, which played a huge factor in the Clippers being an early playoff exit this past season. I feel like Paul George still definitely does have a key contribution to the Clippers' success this season. I just feel like if he can keep that consistent balance, he moves into the perfectly rated category. But I feel like right now he's still just a tad bit overrated.
I would have to agree. I do feel like he had a perfectly great, just bounce back season this year, considering he went from playoff Pete and now being right back where he's left off with an all-star appearance this year. And like we brought up last night, I don't really think he did that bad in the all-star game either. I do think, like you said, if he just gets a little bit more consistent, I would put Paul George right in the perfectly rated category as well. For now, I would have to say just a tad bit overrated.
Alrighty, and to slide back to the MLB, a guy that I've got to see many years while he was with the Pirates. Now he's with the Miami Marlins. That's going to be outfielder Starling Marte, and I'll let you kick things off for that one.
Starling Marte has just never really been the same since he took steroids. And you saw what the Pirates did in his one good season. Right after that, they traded him away, and I think that was one of the smartest things they could have done because I think that they realized that he was coming up on some rough times in his career. I would totally have to say that Starling Marte is overrated because I just haven't seen the numbers that he used to put up and that other center fielders are putting up. So for that reason, I would have to say overrated.
I've got the same take on Marte. I would have to put him in the overrated category because when you hear a lot of people talk about Marte, he's always been known, for his defense. And I mean, we saw in his last few years with Pittsburgh and even while he was in Arizona that he really wasn't the greatest defensive center fielder anymore. I feel like his injury may have caused a little bit into that, and he was a little afraid of playing certain positions in the outfield. I mean, obviously we've seen his bat hasn't been as great as it was either. So I feel like he's starting to get to a point in his career where it's kind of dying down, and I still feel like people talk about him a little too highly. So I would still put him in the overrated category. But if he puts up good numbers this season, I could definitely drop him down to the perfectly rated. All right, and to move on to player number 8, a guy that's always seemed to be in the center of a lot of controversy in the NFL is going to be Rams corner Jalen Ramsey. And I'll let you kick things off for him as well.
I'll actually let you go first because I have to do some research on him because I'm not that familiar with Jalen Ramsey over the last couple of years.
Okay. So to start, I would have to say Ramsey is – this might come as a lot of surprise to people, but I would put Ramsey in the perfectly rated category, but a lot closer to the underrated than the overrated side. I mean, a lot of people were asked who's the best corner in the NFL, who's the best corner in the NFL. People name guys like Jair Alexander, Patrick Peterson, Xavier Howard, Bryce Callahan. Like, you don't hear a lot of people say Jalen Ramsey. And I mean, the dude is just good. Like, there's no denying it. As many people love to hate him. Like, he's an easy guy to hate because he's just always seems to be in the center of controversy in games. But the dude is solid. Like, if you want him to lock somebody down, I mean, we saw this past season, he owned DK Metcalf, and not many guys are able to say that. So I would definitely put him more towards the underrated side, but I would say perfectly rated.
Now that I just checked his stats, I would also have to agree and say perfectly rated. And for the reason, like you said, that he also just locked down DK Metcalf, and that can't be easy to do. I think that there's still a lot of room to grow, and I do think that he's a very easy player to hate, like you agreed, but I think he is leaning more towards the underrated side of perfectly rated.
Alrighty, and to move on to another guy in the NFL, actually one we just talked about a little bit ago, Dallas Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott. I mean, I kind of get my input on him earlier. I definitely feel like he is a good quarterback and possibly top 10 out of all the current quarterbacks. However, do I think he's worth a $160 million deal quite yet? Not really, because we haven't seen a whole lot besides good regular season performances, because we've not really seen a whole lot of him in the playoffs. So hopefully he lives up to that deal this upcoming season and in the next 4 years to come. But for right now, I would have to say Dak is just a tad overrated, just because I have a feeling there's a lot of other quarterbacks that are better than him that deserve a contract like this and don't have it.
I would have to completely agree and also say that he's overrated. And I think that that comes with being his struggles to win the easiest division to win in the NFL. Granted, it still is the NFL. I get that it's still hard. But I'm just very not impressed with what I've seen with Dak so far, and I definitely don't think he's worth what he's being paid. I kind of feel the same with him as I do with Trevor Bauer, except I'm weighing more on his effect on his team.
Alrighty, and to kill two birds with one stone here, I think we hit both these guys at once. We're gonna go with Philly's duo, Bryce Harper and Reese Hoskins.
I'll kick this one off if that's all right with you.
All right, yeah, let's hear it.
I would have to say that Bryce Harper is extremely underrated. He has played very well his 2 years with the Phillies, and I just think he's a player like Michael Thomas. He's very easy to hate, I think. And that's because he's baseball's like I don't remember which one it is, but it's like protagonist, I think, which is the bad one. And I just think it's very easy to hate on Bryce Harper and call him overrated because of that contract. But I do have a hot take with Bryce Harper for next episode, and I'm interested to see what you guys think about that one. But for right now, based on the stats Harper has put up in Philly, I would say underrated, also because of being called overrated so much. He eventually becomes underrated then at that point.
Alrighty, so I've got a different take than you on Bryce Harper. I think Bryce Harper is definitely one of those overrated guys. I mean, when he came into the league, it was always a debate between Mike Trout or Bryce Harper, Mike Trout or Bryce Harper. And a lot of people say Bryce Harper, and a lot of people, I've seen some people still say Bryce Harper. I mean, you look at Bryce Harper with Philly, both years he's played, they've missed the playoffs, haven't had great seasons. Harper's the type of guy that I think has good performances when the season's almost over for them. But like when it's in the heat of things and they need key wins, Bryce Harper just kind of disappears. And I feel like to pay a guy that much money, you expect him to put up solid numbers every season. And I feel like, I mean, definitely he's led the league. I know he's been in the top, but for on base percentage, which is definitely a good stat to have now, but I have a feeling walks contribute into that a lot because Harper is definitely one of those guys you're going to get a lot of strikeouts from. But when he is on a tear, I mean, you got to watch out. But I don't know. I feel like there's a little too much hype around Bryce Harper.
I'll go ahead and start things off with Reese Hoskins then. But I would also like to add on to Harper that, like you said, that he does walk a lot, and I think that that does really help his case for being one of the best at getting on base in general in the league right now. But I would have to say that I agree that he's just kind of not there whenever his team needs him the most. But anyway, on to Reese Hoskins, because I've got some more on Bryce Harper tomorrow. I would have to call Reese Hoskins perfectly rated right now. I think that's because I've seen the good in Reese Hoskins. Like I've seen the really really good of Reese Hoskins, but I've also seen the terribly bad of Reese Hoskins as well. And I feel like if he kind of hits that middle ground there almost, I could totally see him become a very good player. And I do think he's kind of there. But right now, I would just have to call him perfectly rated because I just haven't seen enough from him yet.
All right, so to talk about Rhys Hoskins, I feel like you could almost put him in perfectly rated, but he is headed more towards the overrated side of things. I mean, you look at a guy like Rhys Hoskins, hasn't hit over 250 since his rookie year. And I mean, obviously, I know first basemen usually don't hit for an extremely high average. But you look at a guy like Hoskins in 2020 hit 245, 2019 hit 226, 2018 rookie year hit 259. So I mean, with Hoskins, you're getting a guy that doesn't strike out a whole lot, but I mean, he seems to his swings are just odd because when I've watched Phillies games, he's one of those guys that if he gets served up a pitch right down the middle, he'll watch it for strike three. But if it's a pitch out of the zone or like nowhere close, he seems to be swinging. So I feel like if he could dial that in and maybe bump that average and on base percentage up a little, he definitely would be perfectly rated. But I just think for now, I'd have to say overrated because we haven't really seen his full potential yet, I don't think.
For me, with Rhys Hoskins, if you'd leave that page up for 1 second, I would have to go and say that because of what I've seen, for example, the page you just pulled up for me, he's almost hit 100 home runs in 4 seasons. He's at 91 currently. If I'm not mistaken, he went over to Japan when MLB went to Japan and played really well. And he also finished 4th in Rookie of the Year. So, like, it's there. It's definitely there. And he hit, also to add on to that, he hit 34 home runs in 2018. So it's not that it's not there. I just think, like you said, I think he needs to dial it in a bit more and then he'll be just fine.
Alrighty, and close things out. Part 2 of the overrated, underrated. We're going to look at former Twins pitcher Trevor May, and I'll let you kick things off for him as well.
I have some very strong opinions on Trevor May, considering overrated and underrated, and I would have to say Trevor May is one of the most underrated players in the game. Trevor May has always been an excellent weapon coming out of that bullpen that the Twins used to have, and I do think he's going to fit in really well with the Mets, and you saw him get what he deserved from the Mets. And in 2020, he posted a 1-0 record with a 3.86 ERA, and I do just think that it's there, and I think he can dial it in more. If you would scroll up so I could see his whip too, I would appreciate it.
So yeah, you look at a guy like Trevor May, and like you said, I do feel like he is very underrated. I mean, you look at a guy pitched 23 innings last year at 38 strikeouts. When you average more than a strikeout an inning, being a pitcher in the end, I feel like that's extremely hard. So I would definitely say if he can keep doing what he's doing, he even falls farther in the underrated category. But I would still say that he is one of the most underrated pitchers, not only pitchers, but players in the MLB. He does not receive enough credit for what he does. And then I'd say to finish things out for episode 3, we go over our second half NBA predictions and where we think teams finish in the playoff race. So I'll let you give your top 8 for the East, and then I'll give my top 8 for the East, and then we'll do the West.
Give me 1 second to pull it up here, and I'll go ahead and show it. So for my East, I'd have to go Nets, Bucks, Sixers, Heat, Celtics, Raptors, Knicks, and Hornets. Sorry. I do think that the obvious choice for the finals is the Nets for the East. By far, I just don't think you could beat that like quadruple now of Blake Griffin, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. You have four of the best scorers from our generation on one team, and I just don't know how that team can lose. But I do like. I feel like the East is way weaker than the West for sure. Where I have a very tight race between the Jazz and the Lakers. But my standings, I think, are going to be Jazz, Lakers, Suns, Blazers, Clippers, Mavs, Nuggets, Warriors. I do think that the Warriors are going to sneak in as a very, very, very sneaky 8 seed. Come in, and I do think that they're going to just push the Spurs right out of it because the Spurs are going to eventually fall out of it. But I do think that the Lakers just have to stick with it as much as I'd love to see the Warriors or Mavs or Jazz even or Suns just go on there to the finals. But between the Nets and the Lakers, I would definitely have to say the Nets because again, I just don't know how you can bet against that good of a team.
Yeah, and to your point, I'll go over my Eastern Conference final 8. I've got the Nets also at 1. I've got the 76ers 2, Bucks 3, Celtics 4, Heat 5, Raptors 6, Hornets 7, and Knicks 8. You can definitely make a solid argument for those top 2 to make a deep run between the Nets and Sixers, but I feel like in the end, Brooklyn is going to take the Eastern Conference. But my dark horse team in the East would probably be the Boston Celtics. I mean, when you look at a team that's got Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker. I mean, if they get hot, you got to watch out for Boston. So I feel like even with the trade deadline coming up, if they could land a big name through trade, I feel like Boston becomes a serious contender in the East. And then for the West, I've got the Lakers finishing in the 1 seed, Jazz 2, Suns 3, Clippers 4, Nuggets 5, Trailblazers 6, Spurs 7, and then the Warriors coming in at the 8 seed. I mean, when you look at the West, there's a lot of powerhouse teams. The Lakers, the Jazz, the Suns have finally made their emergence. The Clippers, and even the Nuggets have shown some signs. Obviously, look, last year they made the Western Conference Finals. Ultimately, they did lose to the Lakers, but nonetheless, they put up their best fight. So my finals pick would probably have to be the Nets and Lakers. But my dark horse team from the West is going to have to be the Phoenix Suns. I mean, you look at guys like Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Chris Paul. That's a scary trio. And if they get hot like they did last year in the playoffs, they're definitely a team to look out for.
I would have to go ahead and give my two dark horse teams because I didn't do that yet. I don't know if you'd really call them a dark horse team, but I would definitely have to say the 76ers because I just don't hear much about them at all for as good as they've been this year. I feel like I do have the Bucks just barely edging them out, and I could totally see the Celtics as well overhop the Heat in mind too. But just right now, I think that the Sixers could make a serious run for their money with the Nets. But for the West, I gotta go with the Warriors or the Mavs. The Mavs, they've got Luka, and they look really, really good right now. Same thing with the Warriors, especially if you could get your young guys to play good like they have been, like James Wiseman, Kelly Oubre, get some of your other guys involved as well, maybe make a big move at the trade deadline. I would not be surprised at all if that happens. I wouldn't quite count the Warriors out yet, especially like even if they have to go up against the Lakers or the Jazz in the first round of the playoffs.
Alrighty, so I think that concludes things here for episode 3. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will be back with more tomorrow.
I'd like to give a slight teaser tomorrow. We got a new segment coming up, weekly thing called Hot Take Tuesday. We've got our first guest coming on discussing the team breakdown. I'm going to try to do that for as many as I can, but I just didn't have a Twins fan that I could have on discuss how he feels about the team. But tomorrow is going to be one of the most fun ones we've done yet. It'll probably be an earlier one, though, so I'm very excited for it. Hopefully we'll have all 4 people back, too. But thank you for sticking with us. I know this one was a bit longer. I think this is probably the most in-depth one we've had, even though it was just the 2 of us. I definitely think that this was probably one of the best we've done so far, but we're only going to get better. But we'll see you in the next one. Peace.